Hello and welcome back to Remote Learning at East High School. This is the April 13th Intermediate Percussion Module help video. I hope you all had a happy Easter. Before we get into the music, there's a couple things I want to talk about with you based on some of the assignments that I've heard so far. Most of you are doing a really good job of practicing with a metronome, but when you're not, those of you who are not using a metronome when you practice, boy, you can really tell. And some of y'all's tempo is all over the place. And so especially through this time when you're not playing with other people and playing in rehearsals all the time, that metronome really needs to be your best friend. And so if you're not using it regularly already, I strongly suggest that you make that part of your practice routine. The other thing is pay attention to the details that are in the music. Most of you are reading the rhythms very well and are getting the accents very well, but pay attention to the stickings. There are some sticking errors that I'm hearing and seeing in some of your videos, and then also the dynamics. The dynamics are really important as well. And I always say that there's really three areas. You've got to get the dynamics, the notes, and the rhythms. It's not just notes and rhythms. The dynamics have to be there too. And so pay very close attention to the details. So let's jump into the technical section. So here in the technical section, we have the 16th note grid, which is a really popular exercise. And it's kind of similar to the one that you guys did last week with the accents and taps. And this is going to be very similar and involve those upstrokes and downstrokes like we did last week. But we just kind of take it a step further and add straight sticking to it. So I'll play the exercise for you and we'll talk about some strategies to practice this so that you can be successful with it. Tempo is 80 beats per minute. And here we go. This is 16th note grid. Okay, so you notice that I was playing the accents all at the same height and the taps all at the same height, and that's really important. This is what we call a two-height exercise. So there's one height for the accents, you can say maybe 12 inches, and then 4 or 5 inches for the taps to start you off with. The interesting thing about this is that it really is like the accent tap exercise. If I turn the metronome on and just isolate the right hand in the first measure, so here's the right hand in the first measure. And if you notice, I'm using those two stroke types we talked about last week. Downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke. And the left hand will be involved in some of the same things. So practice your stroke types and even practice this exercise hand separate if you need to, so that you can master those stroke types and so that the accents and taps sound distinct from one another and they're not getting muddled. The 16th notes should continue without interruption. Again, that goes back to your metronome practice. And so it's just straight 16th notes and an even motor rhythm sticking. So if I played it without accents, the rhythm is just straight 16th notes, and so it's just a static rhythm, and that rhythm shouldn't change when you start adding in the accents. It should just sound like straight 16th notes still, but with different accented notes that pop out here and there. So have fun with 16th note grid and on to the musical section. For the musical section, we are continuing with bus work. This is the one that you guys started on last week. I've added a few measures to it, and so it's a continuation of what you've already learned. So continue to improve on the music that you've already played and do a nice job with the new music as well. I'd like to play through this for you, and I believe we're going up to measure 25, yeah. And I'll play that for you, and then we'll talk about a couple things to help you practice it. So here's 110 beats per minute, performance tempo, and here's the first 25 measures of bus work. Okay, so a couple of new things here. I want to draw your attention to one thing first. Um, some of us are running into issues with the sticking on flams, and so let me just try to clarify that for you. You're only going to see one sticking written under a note with a flam on it. So like if I'm looking at the beginning of measure 17, I see this. And it's in the music, it's printed right, left. Now what that means is that the main note, if it's a right-handed flam, the main note is on the right hand, which means the grace note is going to be on the left. If the flam has an L under it, that means it's a left-handed flam, and the main note is left hand. So the right-handed little grace note is actually going to come first. So I just wanted to clear that up for those of you who are having issues with that. But make a difference between the grace note and the main note. I don't want them to turn into double stops. We have double stops here, so we need to make a distinction between the two. Those double stops being in measure 14 and 15, I guess. So make a difference between the double stops and the flams, and don't let them happen at the same time. The rhythm in measure 23. Let's look at this real quick. So the rhythm, if I were to slow it down, let me just slow this down so that you can hear how it fits together. This is going to be 80 beats per minute. And this is a perfectly fine tempo to set aside this measure and practice it at a slow tempo and speed it up so that you can play it in context with the rest of the music. But let me count this rhythm for you because at first glance it looks a little bit confusing, but it's not too bad. So there's 80 beats per minute. 1 and a, E and. 3 and a, E and. So that's the rhythm in that measure. The tricky thing that is going to get most people is the fact that the first beat is no big deal. 1 and a, that's no big deal. You guys can handle that. After that, though, is a 16th rest. So we don't actually say 2, okay? The next note that happens is E, the E of 2, and then and of 2. So we're actually counting it 1 and a, E and. And then the nice part about this, just life is good sometimes. Beat 3 and beat 4 of that measure is exactly the same. So if I were to put it with the metronome at the slow tempo, it's going to sound like this. 1 and a, E and, 3 and a, E and. Same thing twice. So don't let that confuse you. The metronome work is really, really key on this one. There's a lot of timing traps that you could fall into if you're not practicing it with a metronome. So do it with a metronome every time. And good luck with bus work. Let's move on to sight reading. So lastly, we're going to look at Ode to Joy, which is our sight reading example for this week. First of all, I want to look at the key signature. The 2 flats in the key signature mean that it's either going to be in B flat major or in G minor. And if you've looked at the end of the song and see that it ends on B flat, then you can pretty well guess that it's in B flat, not in G minor. Rhythmically, there is one thing that I want to look at in measure 4, and this happens again in measure 8. We're going along with quarter notes, and all of a sudden we have a dotted quarter note followed by a single 8th note. The dotted quarter note actually lasts for a beat and a half. So you're thinking 8th notes all through that. So if I just start in measure 4, I'm thinking 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3. So the quarter note with a dot on it actually lasts for a beat and a half. So that one little 8th note that's by itself is on the end of 2, and then the half note is on the downbeat of 3. So let me play Ode to Joy for you, but hopefully you have a good time playing this one. This is a really beautiful tune. So, all right, this is Ode to Joy. And that's it for this week. So hopefully you enjoy playing this music. Once again, use your metronome, pay attention to the details, have a good time, and I look forward to seeing your assignments. Thanks, guys.